A young priestess joins a group of rookie adventurers who decide to raid a cave infested with goblins. Things quickly go awry when the inexperienced party is ambushed by goblins, resulting in all of them save for Priestess being killed, raped, or captured. Priestess is rescued by the arrival of Goblin Slayer, who swiftly kills the goblins attacking her. She decides to follow Goblin Slayer as he proceeds deeper into the cave, killing more goblins and teaching her about their psychology and battle tactics. With Priestess's help, Goblin Slayer is able to kill the remaining goblins, including a goblin shaman and hobgoblin. They then discover several goblin infants, which Goblin Slayer mercilessly kills to prevent them from becoming threats in the future. Despite the traumatic experience, Priestess decides to join Goblin Slayer as his adventuring companion. Goblin Slayer accompanies his childhood friend Cowgirl to the city to sell her uncle's farm produce. He later heads to the Adventurers Guild to find work, where he is treated by the rest of the adventurers as a weirdo due to his low-quality armor and only accepting goblin quests despite being a high-ranked adventurer. Nevertheless, Guild Girl is glad for his help since most adventurers don't take goblin quests due to their low pay, and those that do are inexperienced. Goblin Slayer reveals that when he was a boy, his village was attacked by goblins who killed nearly all the villagers, including Cowgirl's parents, and that he saw his older sister raped and killed by goblins. This led him to train himself and learn how to kill goblins, but also resulted in him becoming socially awkward and obsessed with killing goblins, which Cowgirl's uncle warns will be why Goblin Slayer will never be normal. Cowgirl continues to support her friend despite her uncle's warnings, as she wishes to apologize to him for not bringing him with her to the city on the day before the goblins attacked their village. Later, Goblin Slayer and Priestess attack a fortress occupied by goblins, burning it down and preventing the goblins from escaping. Elsewhere in a large city to the east, a high elf and her companions confirm that an adventurer they call Orkbolg exists, whom they are looking for. High elf archer, dwarf shaman and lizard priest asks Guild Girl for an adventurer who they called Orkbolg and Beardcutter in their race's tongue, who is actually Goblin Slayer. While Goblin Slayer talks with the trio, Priestess gets defended by Witch, an acquaintance of Goblin Slayer. When some rookie adventurers try to convince Priestess to leave Goblin Slayer and join them, who they assumed is only using Priestess as bait. High Elf Archer explains to Goblin Slayer that their races have united with the human kingdoms to fight against the Demon King's army and want to hire him for a quest related to that. Much to High Elf Archer's anger, Goblin Slayer initially refuses, as demons are not his concern. However, Dwarf Shaman and Lizard Priest mention ruins in elven lands occupied by goblins, which convinces him to join them. Priestess also joins their quest after calling out Goblin Slayer for not talking with her first if she wanted to join. As the group make camp and enjoys their race's food, a drunken High Elf Archer berates Goblin Slayer for his rude behavior and narrow-mindedness, while the others talk about where goblins came from. After finally reaching the ruins and once High Elf Archer killed the sentries, Goblin Slayer and the others head inside. Goblin Slayer's group enters the ruins where he notices there are no totems inside, suggesting these goblins are not led by a goblin shaman. After saving the life of an elven prisoner tortured by goblins, an angry High Elf Archer vows to avenge her fellow kin. The group soon finds a hall where all of the goblins are resting. Using sleeping and silence spells, Goblin Slayer's group kills all of the sleeping goblins without alerting the others. However, their silence alerts the goblins' leader, an ogre who is a servant of the Demon Lord. The ogre attacks the group using his strength and fire magic and proves difficult to kill due to his large size and ability to heal minor wounds quickly. With his allies at their limit, Goblin Slayer uses his trump card, a magic teleportation scroll given to him by Witch, which sends strong jets of water from the bottom of the ocean to seriously damage the ogre before giving him the killing blow. As elvish reinforcements arrive to take over the ruins and Goblin Slayer's group heads back to the city to rest, the experience she had with Goblin Slayer and his obsession makes High Elf Archer want to take Goblin Slayer on a proper adventure. After recovering from his wounds, Goblin Slayer helps Cowgirl cart supplies to town. There he meets High Elf Archer, Dwarf Shaman and Lizard Priest, and tells them he is open to the idea of exploring some ruins with them. Priestess informs him that she has been promoted to the next adventurer rank, and formally thanks Goblin Slayer for saving her life. He then encounters two young adventurers who lost a sword in the sewers infested with giant rats, and he advises them to use a club as an improvised weapon so they can retrieve it. Guild Girl then asks him to act as an observer on a promotion exam, where she punishes a Rhea scout for stealing loot from his party. The Rhea scout considers attacking Guild Girl, but is dissuaded by Goblin Slayer's presence. Meanwhile, the two young adventurers manage to recover the sword thanks to Goblin Slayer's advice. Goblin Slayer then receives a special goblin slaying request from Sword Maiden herself. Goblin Slayer and the rest of the party journey to Watertown, where they meet Sword Maiden, a retired adventurer who defeated the previous Demon Lord. Sword Maiden informs them that there have been a string of mysterious and violent murders in the town recently, and they suspect the culprits are goblins living in the town's sewer system. Since the army won't mobilize to fight goblins and other adventurers have failed, she decided to reach out to Goblin Slayer. Goblin Slayer agrees to the quest and leads the party into the sewers, where they discover the goblins have learned to use boats to navigate the sewers. After sinking a goblin boat, the party attracts the attention of a giant alligator, which they take advantage of by tricking it into destroying the rest of the goblin fleet. As they return to the surface, Goblin Slayer is troubled at the fact that the goblins knew how to use boats, yet were unaware of the existence of the alligator, leading him to conclude somebody had deliberately placed the goblins in the sewers. After a brief rest in town, Goblin Slayer and his party venture back into the sewers to investigate the source of the goblins. As a precaution, Goblin Slayer brings along a canary to warn them of any poison gas. The party delves deeper into the sewers, but are led into a trap when they are locked inside a tomb. The goblins also begin pumping poison gas into the room which the canary warns the party of, and they successfully seal off the vents to prevent the gas from entering. The goblins then resort to attacking the party directly, and it is revealed they are being led by a goblin champion. The goblin champion critically wounds Goblin Slayer and attacks Priestess as the goblins overwhelm the rest of the party. Motivated by Priestess's screams, Goblin Slayer regains consciousness and attacks the goblin champion from behind, tearing his right eye out in the process. The goblin champion and his minions flee in fear, giving the party the chance to regroup. Priestess's wounds are slightly healed, but Goblin Slayer collapses from his own wounds. Goblin Slayer makes a miraculous recovery thanks to Priestess and her part in the resurrection ritual. While the rest of the party continues to scout the sewers, Goblin Slayer and Priestess spend the day in town re-outfitting and having ice cream at the pier. They meet Witch and Spearman, who have delivered an item at Goblin Slayer's request that will soon prove invaluable for their next journey into the sewers. The party regroups with Goblin Slayer and Priestess, and they descend into the sewers once more to find a giant eye. With a little ingenuity, the party easily defeats the creature by getting it to incinerate itself by having it fire in a room filled with flour. Goblin Slayer and his party defend themselves from the oncoming horde of goblins as they try and remove the mirror. They successfully move the mirror and take cover under it, so that Dwarf Shaman may collapse the roof and crush the goblins. Victorious, they escape with the mirror, opting to entomb it in concrete. Later, Goblin Slayer confronts Sword Maiden, suspecting her to be the cause of some of the events that spurred the goblin investigation. She confesses her part in it, expressing she only wished to bring attention to the matter due to her crippling fear of goblins brought on by her traumatic past. Goblin Slayer, while not entirely understanding, promises her he will continue to kill goblins even in her dreams. Sword Maiden then declares her affection for him. While the party travels back home, Goblin Slayer announces he'd like to try ice treats, promising to share some with them as well once they get home. The heroine getting ready to face off against a demon lord with some of her friends, while Goblin Slayer narrates how he wanted to be an adventurer growing up. Not any ordinary adventurer, but a true hero like the heroine. Obviously this didn't quite work out as we cut to the present and find him in the wagon heading back to his town. After that we go back to that argument Goblin Slayer had with Cowgirl as a child, and see how it went from his point of view. His sister guessed he was jealous that she got to go to the city while he didn't and tells him he should protect girls, while not envying others because it'll make you into a goblin. Obviously this is a child's tale, and we get another moment of her being an awesome big sister before Goblin Slayer wakes up as an adult. He goes out without his armor to check for any signs of goblins. Once he's sure there's none, he sits down to have breakfast with the others before heading into town to help with the deliveries and get his gear repaired. Spearman meets him at the guild, not recognizing him without the armor, and tells him if it's money he's after, he should head to the capital since there's a lot of the Demon Lord's army left around to kill. Goblin Slayer obviously refuses, but when he mentions that Spearman should go, he basically points out he's fine where he is because he's protecting Guild Girl. After learning there are no goblin quests, he goes to get his gear and learns that there aren't any more magic scrolls, so no cheesing the next threat with a water blade. Heavy Warrior and Female Knight are training up the rookies since most of them are self-taught, while Priestess runs into Goblin Slayer and Guild Girl learns about him nearly dying. That causes her to remember the bed scene as Guild Girl gives him a letter from Watertown, most likely from Sword Maiden. Then his party and friends all go out to eat at the same time, with Cowgirl feeling a little out of place. But they assure her this is fine, and we learn that the Demon Lord has been killed by the heroine. We also learn about the Harvest Festival, and they share a drink before bringing up the idea of a training hall for newcomers to improve their survival rates. Next day, when Goblin Slayer reads Sword Maiden's letter, she basically states that since their little talk, she's been able to sleep far more peacefully and thanks him from the bottom of her heart. She also reiterates that the heroine beat the Demon Lord and she'll be praying for him. After that, we see Dwarf Shaman and High Elf Archer having a drinking contest, while the other adventurers watch on and gamble on the winner. While all that is going on, Cowgirl and Goblin Slayer spend some private time in a field alone, and she basically throws her hat into the ring of being the girl who he gets with in the end. But all of that is ruined by the next day when Goblin Slayer goes on his daily patrol and discovers a crapton of goblin footprints, our hero plainly telling his childhood friend that she needs to run because their very quaint little farm was about to be taken by an entire army of goblins who want to use the place as a stronghold to attack the town soon. Remember, as few as 50 are enough that they would be bold enough to attack a village like the one they'd lived in prior. So a farm with only a few people living in it will be overrun in the blink of an eye. He can't win against the numbers he counted, especially not with a goblin lord in the lead on an open battlefield. Despite hearing that he can't do anything, she decides not to run, because she knows he will stay behind to fight even if he can't win. He warns her outright that she won't just die, they'll break her from the inside out. But she refuses since he'll lose his home again and they'd lose everything. This basically forces him to go to town and ask for help from the other adventurers, which he never does normally. But the moment they hear the numbers and a goblin lord, they start getting nervous until Spearman points out they don't do anything for free. At this point, High Elf Archer is willing to go down and berate them while Guild Girl runs out and Goblin Slayer offers everything he has. The only thing he won't give them is his life, since if he dies, Cowgirl will cry. This alone is enough to get Spearman and Witch to help him against the Horde for the price of a drink. High Elf and her group will also help out, so if he comes with her on a real adventurer and food for the others. Now 6 silver rankers is good, but to make sure that they have enough backup, Guild Girl talked her bosses into offering a gold coin for every goblin you can kill. Since entire goblin quests are lucky if they pay more than 3 gold coins, 1 gold for every goblin has everyone sign right up for that. That also includes Heavy Warrior, who apparently had his village saved by GS in the past but couldn't help for free. Even the sewer rookies sign up, so he has an army of adventurers backing him now. That night, the adventurers set up a defensive perimeter as the goblins gather and report to their leader, who rallies them with a speech in goblin tongue. Then the attack begins as the goblins come out with meat shields of women who had been beaten, raped, and stripped down. Fortunately, they promptly fall over asleep as Witch and Dwarf Shaman use their magic so they can save the women. That done, the archers start sniping the shamans and give the rest the all clear to start murdering the little bastards wholesale. Lancer and Lizard Priest have their fun protected by arrows because of Witch's spell when goblin riders show up. A pair of scouts signal for the adventurers to get into position and they wait for them to get close enough before they pop spear walls to impale them. As the others continue the mopping up, the rookie warrior ends up nearly getting killed if not for the armor he was smart enough to buy beforehand, and it gets mentioned they planned all this using Goblin Slayer's information. That's when the weak goblins take a step back, and they run into hobgoblins and a pair of goblin champions. The veterans step up to deal with them, while the rookies hang back. With all but one of them accounted for, the question that comes to mind then is where Goblin Slayer is during all of this. Then we see him cutting off the Goblin Lord's escape, covered in blood, Goblin Lord, as he recalls his reasoning for running away. He was so sure that he would be able to try again another time, right up until he ran into Goblin Slayer. Our hero explains that while his army was being used as a distraction, he'd gone and wiped the nest out while he was attacking the farm. Then there are no more words as the Goblin Lord and Goblin Slayer go at one another. Goblin Slayer is at a disadvantage initially, since the goblin was smart enough to wear armor, so he throws grass in his face and cuts close to the eye in an attempt to blind him. But it isn't successful since he isn't used to fighting head-on against goblins of this caliber. Cutting back to the battlefront, we see Rookie Warrior getting a goblin kill as it tries to stab Apprentice Priestess in the back. The others have largely finished mopping up the stragglers, with Heavy Warrior struggling a bit against the champion since it knows how to fight. He relies on Female Knight to make an opening and then uses it to cut the champion in half, while Spearman just straight up kills the one he's fighting by running along the length of the chain and getting a head stab. As for Goblin Slayer, he's not doing as well as they are, but manages to get in a stab at the cost of one of his arms being pretty much useless. The Goblin Lord then gets in a few stomps before Priestess gets involved and presses him between 2 barriers. The Goblin Lord tries to beg for his life and promises not to do anything bad, but the flashback we get shows that he pulled that stunt before and Goblin Slayer just slits his throat. We then get a flashback to before the battle. Goblin Slayer originally wanted her to use 3 protection spells to trap the Goblin Lord, but she only used 2 in order to save his life with her last spell. She then gets on him for a minute before he tells her he trusted her as they head back to the other adventurers and Cowgirl. Then we cut to the heroine who's keeping her word about going to a festival now that everything has settled down. But they immediately learn about goblins popping up, and one of them dismisses them as mere underlings, which pretty much only reaffirms the difference in scale of threats they deal with. Anyway, with the battle done, the adventurers celebrate to their victory and honor their fallen comrades. Even Goblin Slayer is rethinking his position in life, and that he wants to become an adventurer someday before Priestess wakes up. When asked why he didn't post the request as a quest initially, he points out no one came to his village before and he didn't want the same thing to happen this time. He knows that he's a weirdo, so he didn't want to trust in luck. But Priestess assures him they'd always be there to help. That heartwarming moment is then rounded out by some comedy as she requests to see his face beneath the helmet, which immediately draws the eyes of everyone else. You'd think he was the world's most handsome man from how everyone crowded around, but then you learn they had a betting pool, with Goblin Slayer smiling and narration that states that Goblin Slayer doesn't let anyone roll the dice, and so the gods liked him since they couldn't tell where his adventurers would end.
How was the video? We hope it was good. If so, please check these videos. Also, please comment down your thoughts and your suggestions for future videos. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing now to show the support to our channel. We hope to see you soon with another video right in this channel. Have a nice day.